You're listening to Camo and Crayons, the podcast that talks about military life, family life, and everything in between.
Welcome to Camo and Crayons. This is our third episode, and today we're going to talk to my cousin, a Navy captain who is retired. His name is Skip Trahan. You see my last name is Trahan too. We're going to talk to him about mentorship. We're going to talk to him about his service, learning to fly a helicopter, and all of the things in between. It's really going to be an exciting episode.
Hi, my name is Skip Trahan. I am a retired Navy captain, spent 32 years in the Navy from an enlistment in 1980 until my final retirement in 2012. I enlisted as a gunner's mate, so I definitely understand ammunition and guns and those kind of things. From being a gunner's mate, I got selected to go to the Academy Prep School, and then on to the Naval Academy, and from there went into helicopters. And so I spent most of my Navy career flying helicopters, based either in Florida, in Norfolk, in San Diego, in Japan, and then with an exchange assignment with the Air Force. Deployed just about everywhere in the world with the exception of South America. That was and Antarctica. It didn't get down there, but with that exception, just a lot of operations.
All right, so Skip, you had a tremendous influence on Philip long before he even joined the Marines. He was obsessed with you as a little boy. I don't know if you remember all the pictures he would draw and everything, right?
Yeah.
Right, yeah. But he really looked up to you as a military officer, as a leader, as somebody who lived a life of service. So looking back, what do you think is the most important role as a mentor can play in a young man or a young woman's life when they're considering military career, and how can you experienced service members inspire service with these kids?
So I think probably the most important thing, as a mentor is being receptive, being open, being willing to listen. We are a culture that goes very fast. We've always got a checklist of things that we're trying to do, and it's the taking time. To me, it's the listening. Most people I think that most people who have mentors are looking for a mentor. They're looking for an example. They see something that is different, or that they want a piece of, or they want to be a part of, or they hear an experience and they go, man, I'd like to do that. And so I think that for me, that began with stories from your grandfather, Uncle Roland, my uncle, who served in World War II, and serving in Germany, and he was a general's driver for a little while, and the growing up in a small town, there's a desire to maybe not stay in that small town, maybe to see something a little bit bigger, to be part of something that's a little bit bigger. What led me to the military was my desire to be a state trooper, which is kind of crazy because my sister ended up being the state trooper. And when I interviewed with them, they go, hey, you've got a good perspective on what service life would be, but you're way too young. You have no experience. You need to get out there and see the world a little bit. And so they said, the military may not be a bad spot for you. And for me, I ended up talking with a gent who, his name was David Holt. He was a sailor during Vietnam. He served on board the Oriskany as an aviation bosun's mate. And, I learned different things about the Navy through him, and he probably was more instrumental in me going to the Navy than to another service. For me, it was about hearing the stories, and then for me to younger mentors, when you share those stories, you find someone that's going to gravitate to you. They're going to say, "Hey, can you tell me a little bit more about this?" Or "That's interesting," or those kind of things. And that's what I think begins that storytelling relationship. And you just never know what those small conversations or those storytelling episodes are going to lead to.
Mm-hmm. That's really important. That was one thing I noticed, that when you and Philip would talk, being a Navy guy, you really encouraged him, and I don't want to get emotional because I do, but you really encouraged him to pick his own branch and to be his own person. And while you encouraged him to look at everything, you really pushed him to say, "Hey, this is what you need. Don't follow my footsteps and be a serviceman, but don't follow my branch if that's not right for you." So my question is as a mentor and somebody that comes to you and asks you for these kind of advice and this help, and when you're helping them pick a branch, because you were very instrumental in that, what are some tips for veterans and other service members that are guiding young ones to join, when they deep down, maybe they want them to join their branch, but they know that maybe that might not be the right branch for them?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. It has to do with culture. Each service, each branch of the service has a culture that's associated with it, and then each branch inside of that service, each MOS has its own culture as well. And we go to the recruiter, and the recruiter is there to fill a quota and a number. And if you qualify and you fit the billet, you're great. But the key is to get a really good fit. You have to understand what that person is like, and are they going to assimilate into that culture? Because if they're a bad fit, they're gonna knock heads with the establishment, and they're not gonna flourish. They're going to have a really, really hard time with that. And so we're back to the listening part. And I was a horrible listener as a young person. I think most people are. They're just, they go and they blab. They're on transmit. They're not on receive. And so it's important to understand when you're talking to somebody, what kind of a person are they? And the only person that really knows that is them. Everybody can put up walls and facades and that sort of thing. But you really need to listen to them and say, and you don't want to direct them. You don't want to tell them what to do. You just need to listen, and then maybe fill in the little holes in what their experience is. Have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? At the end of my time at the Naval Academy, I decided I was going to go aviation, and I had a choice between going Marine Corps Air or Navy Air. And I had a Navy flyer who said, and this is not a slam at the Marines, he said, when you're 40 years old, do you want to go to bed on a ship, or do you want to go to bed in a tent? And it was, and he was playing a game with me there, because a lot of times that's not the way it works. But at the same time, it went to culture of what the service. The Marines are very austere, and when they are forward deployed and they are pushing, they are in the dirt. And the Navy guys, they go home to their 3 hots and a cot, on the ship. And so that's a little different perspective on that. So rolling that all back, you have to listen to the person, and then find out what is it that you are looking for. What do you want? What do you want to be when you grow up? And there are clues along the way as to why people will choose what they choose. You just have to, the ultimate consulting gig is asking the right questions, even though you may think you have the right answer, so that the person who is the recipient of that comes to that conclusion themselves. You just ask the strategic questions along the way, and you go, "That's me. That's me. This is where I think I should go," and you can guide them to a decision without being heavy-handed. And you certainly don't want to force somebody into a life because it is a lifestyle choice. You are making service is, it's not just a job, it's a lifestyle. You surrender a lot of freedom, you surrender a lot of self, you sacrifice on the family side. And I'm not getting choked up. That was just. You sacrifice a lot, and you've got to be willing to. You don't want to go into that half-heartedly. You have to make the decision. I am going to do this. I am going to give myself to this, and you don't want to do it with reservation, and you certainly don't want to do it because somebody told you to do it.
Yeah,
So
that's a big deal. You don't want to do it because somebody told you, And one of the things I noticed with you is that you were very detail orientated when you were mentoring Philip, talking to him about finances, talking to him about not buying cars and don't get married on your first leave. And, I mean, some of those emails that you sent to him, they were very detailed orientated, about education and school and Pell Grants and all kinds of stuff. And to me, that's what a good mentor does. You give all the information and then answer the questions after.
Hey, after last night's live, can you come in and explain that to some of the parents that we had a lot of kids on our lives last night that wanted, we're going to get married right out of, boot camp. We're going to get married. And Laurie and I, because we've been through it with our kids, kept telling them, no, 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 no. So can you come on the live and help?
And so it's interesting, all service academies are like this. You're not allowed to be married while you're in the service academy, but when you graduate, I mean, there's a list of, you've got so much time slot to get married in the chapel, and you move from being a student midshipman to an officer. You're getting married right away. And the thing that's unfortunate about that is the Naval Academy is not the Navy. It is a totally different. The Navy is a totally different animal than, an education facility. Operations are different. And so, the be patient part of getting married and making sure that you find someone that's a good fit and all those things that's important. That's important. And I had a very good friend of mine tell me that his slogan is, getting married is the single most important financial decision you'll ever make. and sitting there and thinking through that, of all the intricacies of being married and managing a budget, and if you have kids and all the financial implications of that, getting married is a huge and people don't think about it from that. They get married for a whole bunch of other reasons. But anyway, that's a rabbit hole.
Definitely. It is. It really is.
It is.
It really is. All right. Would you ladies want to ask some questions too?
Yeah, you want to take it away, Terry?
If a young man or woman listening today is thinking about going to the military service, and if there was parents that are listening, what would you tell them that they need to know before they go? What lessons of your own career or your own experience mentoring others would you hope that they carry on with their own journey?
I spent some time as a blue and gold officer. Blue and gold officers are recruiters for the Naval Academy. And they will go out and they will speak to prospective midshipmen and talk to them about the service academy, answer questions, and the parents are usually there. And the one thing that always would tell the parents, you know, go into a service academy or applying for a scholarship, the parents are thinking about it in financial terms as well as other terms. But a lot of times it's a financial thing, and there's some prestige with those kind of decisions. And so parents tend to be leaning a little bit forward. I wouldn't say they're pushing, although I have met some pushing parents. And what I would tell them is, you know, first off, I think as a parent, you need to be supportive. You need to be the devil's advocate. You need to ask questions so that your kiddo is thinking about this logically. Does it make sense? Is it a good fit? Is this really where I want to go? Again, you don't want to be pushed into it. And I would tell, you know, my candidates, remember that it's only a 4-year it's a 4-year school. You've got your whole career that sits on the other side of this. And so don't zero in on, I need to go to this school. Think about, what does this school do for me in the promotion of my career? You know, if you want to be a flyer and you want to fly off aircraft carriers, go in the Naval Academy is probably a good route for you. You know, if you want to be a cyber wizard, maybe the Naval Academy is not the best. It could be, but it's not necessarily the way. And so parents would look at it from the standpoint of, I may not have to pay for college. That's not really the decision you want your kiddo to come to. You want them to make the right choice. And sometimes kids have a different perspective on what they want to do. My parents were not thrilled that I went in the Navy. My mother was heartbroken. She was really upset. And of course, my mother being upset my father. And so everybody was upset in the parent realm with my decision to go.
If you had those parents, what would you say to those parents? Those parents that are, you know, naysayers, or they don't want their child to do this, or just any of those kinds of parents that we come across. What would you tell those parents?
That's really hard because no one wants to see, and service life brings with it a whole bunch of risks. Physical, emotional, separation, anxiety, I mean, all those kind of things. Those are all very real. You know, you can't shut parents down. You can't say, well, you don't know what you're talking about, because they're very emotionally invested in their child. I totally get that. The one thing is, you know, and it depends on the parent, how receptive they're going to be to it, but a decision to go into the service, if it's made by the service member, that's them plotting out their life. And you have to, you know, show the parents you've done a great job raising them. You know, they are ready to take that step on their own. And, you know, if it's going to be a good fit, it's going to be a good fit. And it may not be. Again, there's some risk in that. But it will be at the very least, it'll be a broadening experience. Your child is going to experience, you know, things that they had never imagined, dreamed, whatever. Your world is going to open up, regardless of how worldly you are. Your experience, their experience base is gonna open up, and because of that, your child is going to grow. They're going to grow as a person. They're going to grow as a citizen. They're going to grow. You know, it's just going to open different doors for them, and they're going to have different opportunities that if they decide not to do it, they won't have. And, you know, I would use myself as, for me, if I were telling them, I grew up in a very small town. College was not in my parents' game plan for me. It was not my plan at all. And the doors opened, mentors intervened, opportunities, presented themselves, and they were grasped. And sometimes you win and sometimes you didn't win, but you grew from the experience. And if you had told me in 1980 when I graduated from high school that in 10 years I would have gone through the academy and flight school and I was going to be flying helicopters, I couldn't have imagined that. I didn't know what I didn't know. And nobody does until you step through that door and avail yourself to what's out there. And that, again, that's hard for a parent, to let their kiddo go for that. But
Yeah.
To me, it is the right way. Whether they're
Absolutely.
going off to college or they take a job that takes them across the country or they join a service academy, they've got to step out on their own, and you've got to trust that you've done enough for them that they're not going to make bad choices, and they're going to go do things and they're going to learn some stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
That's our job as parents, right?
I
Raise
agree.
them to be able to live without us being with them 24 hours a
Correct.
day,
Yeah.
I have a question. Within my time, I worked several years with Second Expeditionary Operations Training Group. So we trained the Muse, we did all the things with the boats. Our entire purpose was the Muse would come to us, they'd tell us what they can do. We put them through courses, we test them, make sure they're good to go do what they're supposed to on their deployment or rotation.
Yep.
Throughout my time doing that, I had a lot of time sitting in briefings and plannings and all of these things with the Army, with the Navy, with Air Force, all types of things. And I mean, I was young sergeant going in, or I guess young sergeant going into senior sergeant, also got promoted to staff sergeant while I was there. While I was doing that and I'm listening to everybody talking at this table, or I'm listening to these briefings, and you have the Air Force that's like, oh, we don't do it that way, we have to do it this way. You have the Navy that's like, that's wrong, we do it this way. Or you have the Marine Corps that's like, all of you are dumb, we do it this way. Like, it was nonstop. But then suddenly, somehow, some way, the end product was this beautiful thing that worked out without a hitch and was great. And great, now you're on a boat, Merry Christmas. When it came to any type of joint operations you might have been involved in or anything along those lines, what would you say was something that was the more difficult path that you would have seen, like the argumentative type? Like, what was the hard part versus what was the benefit that you saw come out of it all?
From a joint operation?
Yeah, just with a lot of mouths in one pot.
Yeah. So unfortunately, when you sit in those meetings, it's usually everyone comes in with their service culture bias, and then a lot of times you have their egos that are present at the table. And so many times the overall intent, there's alignment, and people are talking past each other just because of communication differences. And so there's real strength in joint operations. I've been very, very fortunate. I got to spend time with the Marines. I spent time with the Navy. I did an exchange tour with the Air Force. I lived in Kandahar with the Army. I speak a little, Army, Marine Corps, Air Force. I've got a little bit of that lingo. And so to me, the first thing that really has to happen is who's ever in charge of those operations has to give what their intent is. Here is the big picture of where we're going. There's a famous story about Admiral Nelson in the Battle of Trafalgar, and how there were no communications on the ships, and yet they had a great victory. He was actually killed in the battle, but it was because he instructed his commanders about what the intent of the battle was. And so even though he was killed and there was no communications and things were kind of falling down, the initiative of the components knew what they were supposed to do, and therefore they were able to carry it out. And so to me, when you're doing joint operations, it's good to be prideful of your capabilities. You will always have to work through communication problems. It's easier if you have a term of reference. This is what this means. There's a story about, I can't remember if it was the Marines or the Army that was actually assisting Los Angeles Police Department during riots. And there was a police officer said, "Hey, cover me." That means something totally different with a Marine gunner than it does to a civilian police officer. And so, spraying fields of fire to provide cover is different than I'm going to watch you, move. And so communicate, again, commander's intent is the most important thing because everyone gloms onto that structure of this is what we're trying to accomplish. Communications, you've got to ID the communication issues and make sure that terminology means the same thing to everybody. And then the third thing is checking egos at the door. It's good to have service pride. It's not good to think that you're the only show in town that can do this kind of thing, and we only do it my way. You will quickly become persona non grata in those meetings. You will get isolated. You will get minimalized, and there's real value in seeing how somebody else does it. Just because you do it a certain way doesn't mean that it's the only way. There's always one more way to solve the problem, and encouraging. Now, at go time, there's no time for encouragement or any of that stuff. You need to sort that out in the briefing. You need to sort it out, before the op goes down. There's no, let's talk about this before we kick the door in. That's just not going to work. But you do it ahead of time, and you do it respectfully, and you listen. Listen to why they do it. One of the things that came out after Goldwater-Nichols Act, I think it was in 1983, was a push towards joint operations, and they required service members, specifically the officer corps, to spend time in other services so that they would understand. And they did that in the staff realm. You went and served at usually a combatant command, like Northcom or Southcom or AfricaCom, and you went and worked in those specific places. Those are staff type positions, and you will find that if you go to PACOM's primarily a Navy command. If you go to Northcom is primarily an Air Force command. If you go to Southcom, primarily an Army command. And so you learn about the staff from the Army perspective. I was extremely fortunate to spend time with the Air Force as an embedded pilot. And so I operated with the Air Force for 2.5 years. And so I got to see what it is that they do and why they do it. And so to me, it conveys a greater understanding of, and I was able to bring that back to the Navy and say, they do it this way because. And so getting to the because piece, I think, is really important. And if you, to me, that's the benefit of the joint forum, where you can exchange ideas, you can experiment with concepts or how they do things, but you understand the why piece of it, and that's where the valuable lesson comes.
Absolutely. I fully agree. Thank you.
Awesome. You ladies have any other questions that you want to ask?
That was my main one. I was excited.
That was your main one?
I've been sitting on that question for 2 weeks now. I've been excited.
I do have one. I see on TikTok that the Navy ships, when they come across a certain point of the ocean, they have a thing. Tell me about that. What does that do for the morale?
So
And what is it called?
you're probably talking, I'm guessing, is when they cross the equator, they have a shellback
Yes.
initiation. Yes. And so shellback initiations have changed a great deal from the earlier days. As a matter of fact, I just sent a note to another former Navy captain. Was just a little bit older than me. And I served just as we were making, I served as we came out of the all male combat, side of the Navy, and we were transitioning into the joint, not joint, the gender integrated combat forces. I'd been in the Navy for 10 years before, where it was all men. I made my last. In 1993, I was on board Theodore Roosevelt. We had one woman out of 5,500 people that were on board the boat. So it's a different mentality of, a cohabitational environment is different. It's just different. There's just different rules. And so prior to that point, a shellback initiation was pretty colorful, and I'll leave it at that. It was pretty colorful. It was pretty physical. It was pretty colorful. Again, this is when I did the shellback initiation. It was in 1984. A quick summation. I had to have my clothes on backwards and inside out. Underwear was outside. I could only crawl. You crawl around on the ship deck, and people were whacking you with fire hoses, and you went up onto the forecastle, and they sprayed you down with the salt water to give you a Navy shower, and then you crawled back in because you had to have breakfast, and they made you drink out of a bedpan, and
Oh my gosh.
they poured eggs on you and oatmeal, and I mean it was outlandish.
Fun.
And at the end of it, after you became a shellback, your uniform was completely trashed. All your clothes came off and went over the fantail, and all the naked people went back down, took a shower, and then redressed and had a picnic on the steel beach. And so, obviously, that just isn't going to fly today. And so it's a much more controlled environment. And some of there are cases where people went overboard and it became a haze, where people exceeded what the norm should have been. And so the Navy, kind of put that all in check and said, okay, here's what we're going to do. This is the way that it's going to be. It's not going to be excessive. And so it's a point of morale to go move back up out of the gory details. It's a point of morale, to receive a shellback initiation card where you've either, there's the shellback initiation, there's a blue nose if you go up into the Arctic Circle. There's the realm of the Suez where you go through the Suez Canal. There's all kinds of, they're morale builders that help codify the experience, and it helps bring the team together. That's what those things are for. You just have to be cautious with them that they don't get too out of control. Mm-hmm. And they become veteran stories that you teach to your mentors down the road. You go, hey, this is the way that it was. This is the way that it's going to be. You're probably not going to do that same kind of stuff, but it's going to be okay.
Okay, so I got one more question, and then do you ladies have anything else?
That's it for
Thank
me.
you for
I love
coming.
my answer. Yeah. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, one more question. Okay, so the day that Philip graduated boot camp and you walked onto Paris Island, I was kind of thinking back, right? Well, first of all, I was just impressed. You had your whole uniform on. You looked so handsome, and that was actually, for people that don't know, that was actually the first day that Philip and Skip met in person. They've always talked on the phone, texted, emailed. It was their first day of meeting in person. But my Uncle David had said to me, this is pretty full circle, right, Laurie? Skip is going to watch your grandfather's great grandson graduate from boot camp, and and your grandfather went and watched Skip, right? So he was pretty. My Uncle David loves this, and so my question to you is how, as a mentor, for somebody that mentored somebody for a very long time, it was absolutely this kid's hero. How does that make you feel as a mentor to see somebody that you've mentored all of these years and meant so you're so important to that person graduate and basically crush their goal, becoming a Marine? And for other veterans that are mentoring, what legacy do you think that they should leave with that kid that they've mentored and has been able to complete their goal?
That's a lot.
Yeah.
That's a big one. So it was fabulous. It was fabulous. First of all, to be invited, and second of all, to be able to go down there and to see Philip graduate. You can say what you want about every single service. Nobody, and I mean nobody, marches like the Marines. It's a true statement. All the formation, I've been through a few of them. The folks that really know how to march are the Marines. They look amazing, and so it was neat to be there and to see that. When I graduated from NAPS, Uncle Roland came to that. And when I graduated from the Naval Academy, Uncle Roland came to that as well. And what's interesting is it was the first time that I had been in the stands. And so it was kind of a different moment for me. There's a pride in, wow, he did it. Marine Corps boot camp is no joke. Anybody who stood on those yellow footprints and got a face full, or has gone through the crucible, they hats off. That is a thing. And so, he looked so sharp, and he was so proud of himself. Because it is an accomplishment. That's a big, hairy deal. Not everybody does that. And I want to say we're like at 1% veterans that are going in, out of the 330 million people you've got 300,000 people, that are, actively doing the thing. And so very proud of him that day. He looked super sharp. He was proud of himself. And Dave's perspective on that's correct. It is kind of a full circle kind of thing. Everybody who's in the service leaves the service, and you leave it in three different ways: you either retire, you get a discharge, or you make an ultimate sacrifice. Those are the options. There's there's nothing beyond that. And so everybody that's been in or has been a veteran understands that they're only there for a certain amount of time, and you can't continue to do it. When I was Forward Headquarters Commander in Afghanistan for a year for all the Navy forces that were there, and I would go out with our provincial reconstruction teams on the ground, and to not get in their way but still observe, I would work with the Army guys to provide security. I'd pull the patch off, bury the 06 patch. I can shoot just as well as anybody else, and I'd go out and I'd stand a position. And at the end of the day, I was 48, 49. I turned 49 when I was there. And at the end of those missions, I would be dragging because of all the kit that you had on. And I'd come back at the end of the mission, and I'd be like, man, that was something the guys are like, yeah, sir, that was great. You know, we're going to go to the gym and we're going to do this. We're going to go run a couple miles. You want to go with us? And I'm like, dude, I need a nap. I can't do this like I did when I was 35. And so there becomes an understanding of we who serve are given the gift of service, but it's not lasting. It only goes for a certain amount of time, and then it's somebody else's job, somebody else's billet to fill. And, you know, God bless people who still want to do it in today's culture, you know, with today's issues, people that embrace service and say, I want to be that guy or that gal, and I want to go out there and I want to do this thing. I mean, I've seen what it looks like at Leatherneck in Afghanistan. That's some tough stuff down there. You know, God bless the people that are willing to stand up and be counted and do that. And so, you know, veterans and mentors need to, in my opinion, there's a joke about the service isn't what it used to be, and it never was. And so, you know, you always remember the way that it was when you were in it, how difficult it was. And oh my God, it's so much different now, and it's so much easier. It's still hard. It's still hard. You may have got a few more creature comforts, but it's still sacrifice. It's still hard. It takes you standing up and saying, I do, and I will go. And so, you know, God bless people for being willing to do that. And for veterans and mentors, encouraging people to have a life of service is not a bad thing. We could all use a few more people that are interested in helping as opposed to not. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, hats off to anybody that is serving or continues to serve or is thinking about serving.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thank you. We appreciate you. Thank you for your service.
Okay, my friends, there's a segment we want to introduce. I've talked about it the last 2 episodes. We want to do a military family spotlight. So one thing we would really love to do is have you go to Sherry or Laurie's link trees on their TikToks. Their TikTok handles will be listed below in the comments. And there will be a Google form for you to fill out your service members' information, whether it's just a few sentences about what they do, their name, just a couple things about them. And each episode, we're going to pick one service member of your guys' families and take a little bit of time to recognize them for what they do, shine a spotlight on them, and make sure they have everything that they need to feel recognized. And just so all of you can see everybody else that's out there too, going through the exact same situations, and we can all be together.
Well, thank you for joining us, and we were so happy to have you. Please don't forget to like, follow, share, and subscribe. And then all of our notes will be in the show notes, our email, our social medias, and contact us if you have any questions or if there's something that you want us to focus on the next episode.
Listen up, maggots. You have one mission and one mission only. Hit that like button right now, and you will subscribe to Camo and Crayons. That is a direct order, Private. No excuses, no hesitation. Move it, move it, move it! Subscribe now or drop and give me 20. Camo and Crayons, fall in! Hooah!
Camo and Crayons was recorded and produced by SWA Creative Media.